If you can't care for my sister, we're getting a divorce. It's been 2 months since my sister-in-law, Mary, returned from overseas and started staying at our house. I was being exploited by her day after day, and the stress was building up. I decided to talk with my husband to see if there was any way to resolve it, but he turned red with anger and demanded a divorce. I argued that it was an excessive leap to come to such a conclusion, but he refused to listen to my words. Let's have a proper discussion about what we should do moving forward. There's nothing to discuss. My sister will stay in this house as long as she wants. Frustration grew inside me as my husband casually uttered those words, and I couldn't bear it any longer. Eventually, it escalated into a big argument. Mary witnessed our situation, and not only did she fail to intervene and stop us, but she also smirked with satisfaction. It was obvious that she was the cause of all this. I had no idea what she was thinking. 2 months ago, Mary, who was married abroad, got divorced and returned to New York. She lost custody of her children to her ex-husband and was deeply heartbroken. She decided to live in a hotel instead of moving back in with her parents to avoid their probing. Eventually, she started coming over to our house occasionally, saying she was lonely. About a week had passed since Mary had started visiting, when one day I returned home from work and my husband stopped me from entering my own room. "Hold on, don't just barge in there." "Huh? Why?" "I can't have my sister living in a hotel forever, so I decided to let her use this room." He had decided to not only let Mary move in, but to let her use my room without discussing it with me. All my personal belongings were still in the room. "This is a problem. You should have discussed it with me first." "You're such a petty woman. Why can't you just tell her to make herself at home? Mary didn't just get divorced, she lost her children, too." I felt guilty, as if I were the one in the wrong when he scolded me like that. As I stayed silent at a loss for words, he told me to make sure to always knock before entering the room. From that day on, Mary started using my room as if it were hers, and started treating me like a housemaid. "You came home late. I'm hungry, so hurry up and make me dinner." "I had dinner pre-cooked, so it will be ready soon." "I'll be playing a game in my room, so call me when it's ready." After preparing the meal, I knocked on the door and called her. She quickly came out, but grimaced at the sight of the meal I prepared. "Spaghetti with meatballs? You know I don't like pasta. I can't eat that. Make me a steak with a full set of side dishes." "I don't have the ingredients, and it'll take a long time to make." "Then never mind. Can you order takeout?" "I've already made pasta for 3, so bear with it today." "No way. Order takeout now." What do I do? My husband insisted that I should just go along with his stubborn sister, but I was at a loss. If I dared to express my feelings, he told me, "Think about Mary's feelings," which left me unable to retort. Mary, knowing her brother was on her side, started waking me up in the middle of the night. "I want ice cream. Go buy it now." "Huh? What time is it?" 2 a.m. The convenience store at the gas station should be open, right? Come on, get up." I was just about to fall asleep. "I have work tomorrow, so give me a break." Whenever I refused, she immediately ran to my husband and tattled on me, resulting in me getting scolded and ultimately having to go get ice cream in the middle of the night. Mary never bothered to clean up after meals or help with any household chores whatsoever. On top of that, she orders me to clean her room every day. Just to be clear, her room refers to my room that she has been using. Day by day, her demands toward me escalated. Now she was asking me for money. "Sorry, that's not possible. If anything, go ask your brother." "I can't believe you're refusing. I'm going to tell my brother again. Are you okay with that?" I'd been following her orders, knowing the difficulties she's been through, but if I gave her the money now, I knew she would keep asking for more money in the future. That day, for the first time, I stood my ground and refused to be bossed around by my sister-in-law. Of course, the moment my husband got home from work, she tearfully accused me of harassing her. "Catherine, why did you make my sister cry?" I simply refused because she asked for money. Plus, she doesn't do any household chores, and on top of that, she treats me like a housemaid. I'm emotionally exhausted. It's been over 2 months since she moved into our home. Can't you do something about it? "Shut up. If you can't care for my sister, we're getting a divorce." My husband turned red with anger and demanded a divorce. I argued that it was an excessive leap to come to such a conclusion, but he refused to listen to my words. Let's have a proper discussion about what we should do moving forward. There's nothing to discuss. My sister will stay in this house as long as she wants." Frustration grew inside me as my husband casually uttered those words, and I couldn't bear it any longer. Eventually, it escalated into a big argument. Mary witnessed our situation, and not only did she fail to intervene and stop us, but she also smirked with satisfaction. It was obvious she was the cause of all this. I had no idea what she was thinking. Mary uttered terrifying words to me. "I'm going to make you regret it. I'm Catherine, currently 27 years old. I'm being constantly manipulated by my sister-in-law. My parents divorced when I was still young due to my father's infidelity. My mother, who raised me as a single parent, passed away from breast cancer when I was 19. Since then, although I had friends, the loneliness of not having a family could never be filled, and I lived carrying that loneliness in secret. It was during those days that I met my husband, Bob. After a year of us being together, we solidified our relationship 3 years ago. The excitement of our early days of marriage has faded, but since getting married, I've been grateful for the presence of a family. Despite this, Bob recently lost his enthusiasm for work, quit his job on his own accord, and has become a part-time worker for 3 days a week. To add to my worries, my sister-in-law, Mary, rolled into our lives. Mary was already married and living abroad by the time Bob and I got married. She was pregnant with her first child, so she couldn't come to our wedding. We never had the opportunity to meet because we were so far away. I've always heard from my mother-in-law that she was a kind and considerate daughter, so I never expected her to be so selfish, leaving me perplexed and bewildered. Her behavior continued to escalate. When I came home from work the following day, Mary was grinning with a handful of bills in her hands. The amount of money she had seemed too large to have been given by Bob. "Mary, what's with all that money?" "I sold some bags and jewelry I found in the bedroom." "Wait, you mean my room?" "Where else would they be?" I immediately rushed into my room and opened the closet, but found my mother's heirloom bags and jewelry were nowhere to be found. Mary laughed hysterically as she saw me coming out of the room in a panic. "Why did you sell my stuff?" "Because you wouldn't give me any allowance." "Don't mess around. Those were family heirlooms from my mother." "Good, so you didn't need them anymore." "That's not the point. Where did you sell them? Tell me right now." "Geez, chill out. It was this place called Super Thrift Shop, but I doubt you can get them back." I headed straight to the thrift shop to buy back the items. She just sold them today, so they still should be undergoing maintenance. It shouldn't be too late to buy them back. When I arrived at the thrift shop, I was confronted with a shocking truth. They had a rule they could only return the items to the person who sold them, unless there was proof that the items were stolen. There was nothing I could do without the proper evidence. I was aware of this rule, but I was so caught up in the moment that it slipped my mind. As I trudged back home, a burning desire for revenge against my sister-in-law consumed me. I will get to the bottom of this. First, I'll start by cleaning my room. Another week had passed. I found myself still at the mercy of my demanding and self-centered sister-in-law, enduring my husband's anger along the way. Finally, the time for the decisive battle had arrived. Like any other day, Mary treated me like a housemaid, and my patience was thin. As the evening approached, I ended up getting into an argument with Bob. "Like I've said before, I can't go on like this if you don't treat my sister better." "Are you threatening me with divorce again?" "If you don't change your attitude toward Mary, I might have to." Lately, it seemed like Bob believed as if he brought up divorce, I would stay silent and obey. As usual, he looked down on me with arrogance, and Mary stood next to him, laughing. That was when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my mother-in-law standing there. "Long time no see, Catherine. Can I come in?" "I'm happy you came. Please come in." "Mom, why are you here?" Upon seeing his mother, I noticed my husband's expression seemed to darken. My sister-in-law, instead of expressing joy at the long-awaited reunion, didn't even show a smile on her face. Why was she behaving like this when her own mother was here to visit? "Oh my, I didn't know you had a friend over." My mother-in-law, upon seeing Mary, said such a thing. "What are you talking about? She's your daughter, isn't she?" "Oh, stop joking. Mary just had her second child. She actually recently sent me some photos." My mother-in-law took out her cell phone and showed me a photo of the real Mary, who was still happily married overseas. The person in the photo was completely different from the woman standing in front of us, claiming to be Mary. As the woman tried to leave the living room in a flustered manner, my mother-in-law sternly stopped her. "So, who are you?" "Well, I am a friend." "Yeah, she's my friend." The lie was apparent from their panicky expressions. That's when I revealed her true identity. "So you aren't Mary after all. I've always thought it was odd. You must be Bob's mistress." "What are you talking about? Don't spout nonsense." I couldn't let him deceive us at this point. I immediately showed my mother-in-law a video saved on my laptop of the two of them getting cozy in my living room. Bob attempted to snatch the laptop away from his mother to prevent her from seeing it, but I intervened to stop him. "What is this? You better have a good explanation."
"What should I say?"
Taking over for my stumbling husband, I revealed the whole truth to my mother-in-law. "Bob has been letting this woman, whom he claims to be Mary, stay at our house for over 2 months, out of pity for her having gone through a divorce and losing custody of her child. On top of that, this woman sold my mother's heirlooms at a thrift shop without my consent." The footage went out, capturing this woman appearing cheerfully and excited, mentioning that she made money from selling my mother's heirlooms. She even suggested to my husband that they go out and have fun with the money. How could she do such a terrible thing? "So, what's happened to the heirlooms?" "They can only return it to the person who sold it, so it's currently being kept at the thrift shop." After informing my mother-in-law, I turned to the woman who seemed quite uncomfortable. "You are Megan Foster, aren't you?" "No, you're wrong. Don't make baseless accusations. Do you have any evidence?" "It's pointless to play innocent. You may not have known, but I happen to be the manager of the super thrift shop." "Huh? I didn't see you there." "I wasn't at the shop on the day my mother's heirlooms were sold because I was attending a meeting at headquarters. Being the manager of the shop, I was able to verify the ID of the person who sold the items. That's how I realized the woman was not my sister-in-law. But I had no definite proof, and I was afraid she might come up with excuses, so I decided to come up with a plan. My mother-in-law had been wanting to go watch a performance by her favorite artist, so I decided to buy tickets for her. The plan was to ask her to come pick up the tickets, invite her to stay the night at our house so she wouldn't have to travel back. Unaware of the situation, she was thrilled, and that's how we got to today. I'm sorry for making you come here without telling you the truth." "That's all right. I understand it's not easy for you to talk about this. By the way, how did you manage to capture the footage?" "I didn't want my belongings being sold without my permission again, so I installed some light bulb-shaped hidden cameras in my room while cleaning. I had a vague suspicion that she might be an affair partner, but I never expected something like this." Sure enough, the footage showed the two of them getting intimate when I wasn't around. It was quite a shock when I first saw the footage, but Bob and I had been arguing whenever we spoke to each other, so I had been thinking it might be time to call it quits. But still, it's tough to witness your husband having an affair.
"Catherine, Mom, I was just being manipulated by this woman."
How pathetic of you to say that, lying about her being your sister and letting her stay at our house. What were you thinking? "Don't blame this on me. I only pretended to be your sister because if we were caught having an affair, I would be kicked out of the house with nowhere to go."
"You keep your mouth shut."
"Besides, you were the one who said it would be convenient for me to use your wife as a housemaid. You even said that if you end up getting a divorce as the result of marital issues, you wouldn't be charged with alimony." I was taken aback and filled with rage upon learning that Bob had said all of this. "Now that your relationship has fallen apart, it's impossible to mend things as a couple. Why don't you guys get a divorce? Then you and I can live happily ever after, right, Bob?" "Sure. You've always wanted a divorce from me, so let's part ways. I've already prepared this, so file it when you're done filling it out." As I handed Bob the divorce papers with my name already filled in, he started to panic.
"Don't rush things. I have no intention of leaving you. Please, just let this one thing slide."
The sight of Bob begging on his knees before me was truly pitiful. His mistress turned to him, teary-eyed. "You won't abandon me, will you? You know I have nowhere else to go if I get kicked out of here."
"Shut up. Don't come near me."
Bob forcefully brushed off the woman clinging to him. Yet the sight of the woman pleading not to break up was so tragic, it made me feel uncomfortable. In place of my husband, who didn't even spare a glance for her, I conveyed something important. "You don't have to worry about where to go." "Huh? Where?" "The police. I reported you earlier for stealing and selling my belongings. They should be arriving here any minute. I'll go back to the thrift shop right away and get your things back, so please tell them it was a mistake." As the sound of the police sirens grew closer, the woman, realizing the situation, apologized to me for the first time. "I'm really sorry. I've learned my lesson. I won't do it again." If apologizing was all it took, then we wouldn't need the police, would we? I presented the woman to the police as the one who stole and sold my belongings. She was soon taken away. Bob, who had been staring blankly at the scene, began to beg on his knees again once the police had left.
"Don't leave me. Your salary is higher than mine. If you abandoned me, I wouldn't be able to survive. You understand that, right?"
You don't have to live a lavish lifestyle. And besides, you should work more than just 3 days a week. Either way, you're going to have to work more to pay me alimony.
"I'll pay the alimony, but can't we find a way to avoid a divorce?"
"No chance. My mind is made up. Sign the divorce papers, now." Under my scolding, with the urging of my mother-in-law, Bob reluctantly signed the divorce papers.
"Hey, about the alimony. Can you deduct it from our division of assets?"
"There are no assets that we have built together."
"But you have a decent amount of savings."
"My savings are from before we got married, so they're not for us to split. In fact, since we got married, I've been covering most of our living expenses, so it's in the red for me." Upon hearing my words, my husband turned pale, but ignoring that, my mother-in-law and I kicked him out of the house. After getting rid of the villain, we couldn't shake off a somewhat melancholic feeling. That evening, the two of us sat together, sharing drinks and having a heartfelt conversation. My mother's heirloom bags and jewelry were safely returned to me later, with enough proof showing that they were stolen. My divorce with Bob was quickly finalized, and I demanded $20,000 each in alimony from Bob and his mistress. Bob was disowned by his in-laws. He had also broken up with his mistress, who was already let out of jail, as they were constantly arguing. My mother-in-law, worried about me being alone, reached out to me every once in a while. Through this incident, I felt our bond was stronger than ever. Fast forward 3 years, and I'm standing in a chapel wearing a wedding dress. I held the hand of the man who'd been waiting eagerly for me to walk down the aisle, as we vowed to love each other for eternity. I felt a trickle of happiness fall down my cheeks.
"You're such a slob. There's no way you're my kid. Get lost, you pig," yelled Bob, and I stepped in to protect Luke. "If you won't acknowledge Luke as your own son, I'll take him in." Days later, when the two found out that Luke had been on TV, they came to our house. "Luke, come home with us," they implored. To them, Luke retorted, "Who are you guys?" "I'm Katherine Johnson. Ever since I lost my husband a few years ago, I've been living alone. Living alone in a big house was lonesome. Having no particular hobbies, every day was unbearably dull. However, there was one thing I looked forward to. That was seeing my grandson, Luke. Seeing my adorable grandson, Luke, was the only thing that brought me comfort. My son Bob and his wife Michelle ran a nightclub together. It seemed to be flourishing, and the couple always seemed busy. The two had a baby after several years of marriage. Apparently, they wanted to have a girl and make her the star attraction of their club. Even before the baby's gender was known, they bought tons of baby girl products, holding high hopes for a girl. However, the baby turned out to be a boy. The disappointment of the two upon knowing that it was a boy was profound. Once the baby is born, you'd think they find it endearing regardless. That's what I optimistically thought, but it didn't go that way. Bob and Michelle showed no interest in the baby they had brought into the world, nor did they seem to care much for him. Even his name wasn't given much thought by the two. Fed up, I presented a few options, and from those, the couple chose the name Luke. The couple continued to show little interest in Luke. The two were determined to have a girl next time, but they never had another child. Michelle gradually began to harbor resentment towards Luke. "All our plans got messed up because you are not a girl. It's all your fault." Michelle seemed to have such misplaced hatred towards him. Moreover, led by Michelle, Bob too began to adopt a cold attitude toward Luke. If only I had intervened at that point, maybe things wouldn't have turned out this way. Eventually, Michelle stopped making meals for Luke. She'd leave a $5 bill on the table every day before heading to work, not returning until the early hours of the morning. Luke spent the long hours from evening to night alone. Just imagine how daunting it must have been for a young child to wait alone for his parents' return. With the money Michelle left, Luke had been buying his meals at the convenience store. Still a young boy, Luke didn't consider things like nutritional balance and would often buy sweets and potato chips to eat. Furthermore, there were times when he would eat convenience store meals that were about to be discarded. A child going to the convenience store alone daily is inevitably noticeable. A sympathetic convenience store worker would secretly share some food with Luke. Thanks to this, even on days when Michelle didn't leave money, Luke was never without a meal. By the time Luke was in 3rd grade, his weight had exceeded 150 pounds. This was the result of his unhealthy diet of sweetbread, convenience store meals, and sweets every day. Bob and Michelle seemed displeased with this. Ever since Luke had put on weight, the two had been verbally abusive towards him. "Look at how fat you've gotten. Get a grip. You're not my child, you're just a fat burden. Get out, you're in the way." When I learned that they had said such things, it felt like my heart would burst. I wonder how Luke felt hearing such words from his father. Worried about Luke, I occasionally visited his house to check on him. From Bob and Michelle's tone, I had a hunch they were starting to resent Luke. I visited their home to confirm that they weren't doing anything terrible to Luke. One day, sadly, my fears came true. "There's no way a fatso like you could be my child. Get lost, you pig." As soon as I opened the door, I heard Bob shouting. I rushed towards the noise and saw Luke lying on the floor. Judging from his hand on his cheek, Bob must have hit him. "Bob, what are you doing?" I rushed over to Luke, pulling him towards me to shield him from Bob. Looking at Luke, he gazed back at me with a vacant expression. His look resembled that of surrender, and I regretted making such a young boy wear such a face. Bob seemed unaware of my arrival, his eyes wide as if they were about to pop out. "Do you understand what you're saying? Luke is genuinely your child," I yelled at Bob. Although Bob is my son I gave birth to, I couldn't comprehend what he is thinking at all. Even if Luke was not the daughter he had hoped for, I could not believe the treatment he was giving to his own innocent son. "If you don't acknowledge Luke as your child, I'll take him in." Both Luke and Bob were taken aback by my sudden words. From there, the conversation moved rapidly. Bob and Michelle, seizing the opportunity to rid themselves of their problem, accepted my proposal eagerly. "Thanks, Mom. Now I can concentrate on my business, right, Michelle?" "Yes, thank you so much." On the day I took Luke in, the two of them said this with the brightest smiles I had ever seen. That smile made me sad. I fully understood how little they cared about Luke. I had been observing, thinking that it would be best for Luke that he was with his real parents, but I strongly regretted not taking him in earlier. On our way back to my house, Luke said, "I'm sorry, I'll grow up fast and move out." What on earth was he saying? When I asked him, Luke replied with a stoic expression. "You regret taking me in on a whim, don't you? You look angry all along." "I look angry?" Luke nodded sadly. "No, I regret not doing this sooner. I should have let go of my notion sooner that you must be happier to be with your real parents." "Aren't you annoyed with me?" Luke looked at me with anxious eyes. I tightly hugged Luke. "No way! I know for sure that I love you more than those two." Luke seemed uncertain of how to react. He was freezing like a statue for a while, and then he mumbled softly, "This is the first time I've been hugged." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I swore to myself that I'd make this kid happy no matter what. From that day on, Luke transformed into a lively and cheerful kid. He started laughing more than I could have ever imagined, and he also became more talkative. Every day when he returned home from school, He would help prepare dinner while excitedly sharing the day's events. "You seem very cheerful today, Luke. Did something good happen?" "Do you know, something funny happened today. While we were singing in music class, a sparrow flew into the room. The teacher was in such a frenzy. I was wondering why, and then she almost started crying, saying, 'I can't handle birds.'" Remembering the event, Luke chuckled. He looked so cute and lovable that my heart melted. Since he started eating healthy meals at my place, Luke's physique became more standard. Although he maintained his childlike charm, his contour sharpened, making him look quite handsome. He shyly told me that the girls at school started talking to him more. Luke seemed happy every day, and I was relieved to see him that way. The day of the first parent-teacher conference since I took Luke in came. Luke's homeroom teacher made a suggestion. "Why don't you have him take an IQ test at the hospital?" This suggestion made me anxious. I felt like they were saying there was something wrong with Luke's intelligence. Is Luke falling behind the others? As I asked this, the teacher hurriedly waved his hands. "No, it's the opposite. From my experience, I believe Luke may be gifted." I was a bit puzzled by the unfamiliar term gifted. According to the teacher, gifted refers to children who possess innately higher abilities compared to their peers. The teacher handed me a piece of paper. "This is a graph showing the change in Luke's grades. At a certain point, Luke's grades have shot up significantly." Sure enough, the graph showed a sudden upward trend. Looking at the dates written on the x-axis, I realized that the change happened right after I took Luke in. I was surprised at how sudden it was, so I asked Luke, "Have you started going to cram a school or something?" This increase is unusual though, but that wasn't it. Apparently, Luke had been adjusting his results to avoid doing too well. I didn't quite understand what the teacher meant, so I turned to look at Luke, who was sitting next to me. Noticing my gaze, Luke began to speak.
"At my old home, if they found out I was doing well in school, they didn't like it. They'd say I was being cheeky and I'd get hit more than usual."
Luke shrugged his shoulders.
"So, during tests, I would intentionally leave answers blank or get them wrong. I actually knew all the answers, though."
Luke smiled smugly.
"Now there's no need for that, so I just take the test normally. It's so easy it's boring. Even just reading the textbooks lets me understand everything in class, which isn't fun. I want to study something more challenging."
Luke sighed deeply. I was momentarily worried that the teacher might feel offended by his words, but my worries were eased when I heard the teacher laughing loudly. "What do you think? If Luke is gifted, we might be able to provide support that suits him. Why not get tested at the hospital?" "If it's for Luke's benefit." With that in mind, I decided to take Luke to the hospital over the weekend. From what I can tell, based on his behavior at school and home, as well as the results of his IQ test, it seems that Luke may be gifted. The doctor spoke clearly. Luke's IQ was significantly higher than average, which surprised me. I had no idea Luke was this smart. No wonder he finds school so easy. To fulfill Luke's desire for more challenging studies, I decided to hire a private tutor for him. The tutor is a veteran who graduated from a prestigious American university, and he understands Luke's characteristics. Luke was pleased, saying it was more fun than school. He passed both the English and Chinese proficiency tests with the highest grade at the tutor's suggestion. When the tutor posted about his proud student on social media, it spread rapidly. Luke became the talk of the town, and we started getting interviews from newspapers and television stations. One day, while spending the usual time with Luke, the doorbell rang. "Oh, are the reporters here already?" There was still about 30 minutes left until the interview time. I opened the door expecting the reporters and was surprised. "Long time no see, Mom. I've come to get Luke." There they were, Bob and Michelle. "What brings you here?" When I asked, Michelle flashed a bright smile and replied, "Dear mother-in-law, thank you for caring for Luke until now. From now on, he will live with us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What on earth is this woman talking about? You must be joking. Luke has an interview soon. I'm very busy. Please leave. Upon hearing the word interview, Bob and Michelle's eyes lit up. So it really was Luke. We saw it on TV. Our son is truly remarkable. Their faces turned towards each other, excitement bubbling between them. And then they blurted out an outrageous idea. If Luke comes back, our shop will be secure. Beside Bob, Michelle was nodding fervently. If we get customers who come to see Luke, our sales will go up. In the long run, we could even leave the management to him. That would make life easier for us. I was astounded at the self-serving thoughts of the two. After claiming that Luke isn't their child, they show up to take him back when they realize how talented he is. A child is, Luke is, not a possession of his parents. Don't you understand? I had reached the limit of my patience. Just as I was gearing up to give them a piece of my mind, Luke appeared behind me. Seeing Luke, Bob and Michelle broke into smiles. Their smiles only stoked my irritation. However, their smiles were shattered by a single phrase from Luke. Who are you guys? Luke asked, staring at the two straight on. They looked bewildered. Who are we? We're your dad and mom. You're our beloved child who I suffered to give birth to. Michelle's words made me feel sick. How dare she call him her beloved child? Just as I was about to retort, Luke smirked and said,
My only family here is my grandmother. I don't know you people who abandoned me.
He stated this firmly. Luke, that woman is your grandmother, not your mother. Come back home with us. Bob tried to persuade him gently, but Luke glared at him.
My home is here with my grandma. Unlike you, she's always shown me love. You abandoned me, and now you want to reclaim me because you think I'm useful? You're not my parents.
It was the first time Luke had ever raised his voice like that. Bob and Michelle cringed at his outburst. Bob, visibly irritated, tried to grab Luke's arm. Just as I was about to intervene, a voice called out from behind Bob. Is what he said true? Did you abandon him? Journalists began to gather around, their faces solemn. They had come to interview Luke. It was already the time of our appointment with them. Reporters surrounded Bob and Michelle. They circled Bob and Michelle, firing off questions at them. Later, this interview was broadcast on television with the sensational title, The Sad Past of a Genius Boy, confronting the parents who abandoned him. The impact was immense. The couple was lambasted on social media, and their business received numerous angry calls. How could you abandon him just because he wasn't a girl? Don't try to manipulate your child for your own convenience. On top of the angry calls, crowds of people apparently gathered to see the faces of these terrible parents. Needless to say, business could not operate normally under these conditions. In desperation, Michelle reached out to her parents for help, only to receive a cold response. You reap what you sow. Deal with it yourself. We have no intention of helping anyone who would abandon their child. Bob and Michelle were universally scorned and abandoned. The two of them were reportedly upset, crying out, Why is this happening to us? Hopefully this incident will be a wake-up call for them. Although, given their current attitude, the prospects seem bleak. After that incident, Luke and I quickly moved away.
I want to cut ties with them. I can't stand going through this over and over.
I respected his decision, and we moved far away to prevent the two of them from ever approaching Luke again. We would have sought legal measures if we could, but it seems it's hard to sever ties with biological parents, even if they are adoptive. In Luke's new school, he made a good friend, who seemed to understand him well. Luke would bring him home, show him his homemade programming, and happily explain his points of interest. While I find Luke's interests a bit hard to follow, his friend seems to understand, listening attentively and nodding as Luke explains. From time to time, they would be engrossed in a discussion about programming. Seeing Luke so happy always made me feel glad we moved here. Thanks to his new friend, Luke has been able to live freely and happily every day. I hope they continue to get along well and support each other.